Okay, so the Sheep Mountain Tunnel and Mining Company built a power plant in 1893 that would come to exemplify Colorado's mining heritage. The wooden building sits perched on a rocky outcrop adjacent to a drop in the channel of the Crystal River, with aspen trees and high peaks forming a scenic backdrop. This landmark continues to adorn postcards today, and some people have called it one of Colorado's most photographed sites. And also in this era, plenty of people on their YouTube channels will post their trips to the Crystal Mill. Now, the description on postcards contains just general information about the history of the mill. One says, this old water-powered ore mill is a remnant of a time of intense mining activity in Colorado's mountains around the beginning of this century. In this presentation, I will describe the development and operation of the mill, its demise, and its rebirth as a symbol of Colorado mining. Prospectors discovered minerals in this area in the 1880s. The original route into this area came from the route from Crested Butte through Gothic over Schofield Pass and then down into Crystal, and the Black Queen Mine and several others sat quite high on Sheep Mountain. So the Crystal Mill is just west of the town of Crystal. Only later was a wagon road developed up the Crystal River Valley, and that's the route that most people would take today to get into the area. Mrs. Captain Jack owned the Black Queen Mine in the 1880s, and after she sold the mine, I wanted to see what happened to the mine, and so that's really how I came about finding out information about the Crystal Mill, because the Crystal Mill was developed, or the tunnel was developed to try to access the ore from the Black Queen Mine. And so the two operations were quite intertwined. So that's the cover of my book, if you haven't seen that already. This is actually a current property map, so you can see the town of Crystal there and the mill just to the west of it, and the Black Queen Mine is in the green there. And basically the Sheep Mountain Tunnel was drilled from near the Crystal Mine west to try to undercut the Black Queen Mine and to try to intersect other ore bodies along the way. So in 1891, this new development promised to unlock the riches of the Black Queen as well as many surrounding mines. The Sheep Mountain Tunnel and Mining Company began driving a tunnel into Sheep Mountain in July. They hoped to intersect many of the ore bodies as well as providing a haulage tunnel for many other mines. Driving a tunnel for these purposes had been successful in many other mining districts, and so the owners hoped that this tunnel would yield similar results. By October, the project employed 15 men. Benjamin Phillips served as the president. He and his business partner, Theodore Bixby, had built the Hotel Jerome, named after and financed by one of Aspen's founders and leading mining men, Jerome B. Wheeler. Aspen's leading citizens, along with notables from Leadville, Denver, and Pueblo, attended the opening banquet and ball, which rivaled, quote to quote the newspaper, in luxurious splendor some of the festivals of the capital of ancient Rome. Quite a claim. But anyways, the event gave Aspen's citizens a reason to feel proud of the progress of their community. And the newspaper described the dress and ornamentation of over 30 women who attended the gala. For example, Miss Ben Phillips wore an elegant black silk dress and a diamond necklace. So Ben Phillips had entered the best social circles in Aspen. He had been successful with actually 2 hotels, and now he wanted to make his fortune in mining as well. He partnered with Mel Carr, who advertised himself as the railroad ticket broker at the Clarendon Hotel, and Carr's nephew, 41-year-old George C. Eaton, had lived in Kansas City, Kansas for the past 22 years. On New Year's Day, 1892, George Eaton placed an ad in the Kansas City Gazette designed to bring investment dollars to the Sheep Mountain Tunnel and Mining Company. Eaton had served as a councilman, he was involved in real estate, and the newspaper described him as a, quote, cautious and reasonably conservative man who had almost a dead sure thing. With an adjoining mine, probably referring to the Black Queen, the newspaper said that that mine had delivered over $2 million to shareholders in the last year. So with this kind of success, what could go wrong? But excitement over mining adventures could make even a conservative man throw caution to the wind. And it's not really known if the figure about $2 million being paid to shareholders was actually accurate or maybe a bit of an exaggeration. You can see here, the company advertised that there would be a substantial quick return on investment. They offered the stock at 25 cents on the dollar, and they expected that the stock would be valued at $1 per share within the year. The ad stated that the tunnel would cut numerous mineral veins, bringing in between $200 and $2,000 a month, and the power plant would be instantly in demand, generating revenue from $500 to $3,000 per month. A testimonial from W.J.H. Miller, one of Colorado's leading mining experts, exclaimed that he regarded Sheep Mountain as one of the richest in the state. In the opinion of A.T. Ferris, one of the best informed mining men of Gunnison County, the mines to be intersected by the tunnel have rich and inexhaustible bodies of ore. In December of 1891, the Sheep Mountain Company had expected to cut the Black Queen ore vein within the month. But by March of the following year, the large ore body had not yet been reached. The miners advanced the tunnel at a rate of 3 feet a day, and they expected that they would break into rich ore soon. This reporting would become a familiar refrain over the next several years as the men drove the tunnel farther into the mountain in search of the always close yet elusive rich ore veins. In January of 1893, the Sheep Mountain Tunnel and Mining Company stock was selling at 20 cents per share, down 5 cents from the initial price of 25 cents, and a far cry from the previous year's claim that it would be worth $1 per share by now. But according to the Aspen Daily Times, the future looked as bright as ever. The company held 13 mineral claims on Sheep Mountain, which they accessed from their well-ventilated 1,200-foot tunnel. They harnessed water power from the roaring Crystal River, which provided electricity that lit up 100 incandescent bulbs in the tunnel. They compared their tunnel to the Cohenhoven Tunnel, which extracted the riches of Smuggler Mountain near Aspen. And once again, they predicted that they would soon hit mineral veins that would send riches flowing in steady volume from the Great Tunnel. Now, Ben Phillips returned from a trip back east, and he said that the sentiment in favor of free silver is growing quite rapidly in the eastern states. As most people are probably familiar with the battle over silver and monetization and all that. So he was quite optimistic about silver's chances, and in that spirit of optimism, he pressed forward with the tunnel, and they built a power plant so that compressed air drills could be used to accelerate the pace of driving to the tunnel. So prior to this time, in fact, the miners had used hand tools to pound into the rock. So here, in this view here, you can see Crystal about 1910, and this is from an old postcard. In the inset there, you can see the power plant that was built. There was a dam across the river, so it backed it up a bit, and this also shows the flume that was used at some point to channel water down the penstock. You can see the town of Crystal there. So it was always kind of a smallish mining camp. And if you kind of look in the middle of the view there, the scar kind of across the lower part of the mountain there is the road coming over from Schofield Pass. And the Schofield Pass would be somewhere there in the background. So you can see it's a very remote and rugged setting. This photograph itself was probably taken on the trail to the Black Queen mine. Here you can see a close-up view of the powerhouse and the dam across it. This dam actually washed out a few times, so that's when they built the flume to try to carry forward operations. So the flume funneled the water down the vertical penstock there that you can see below the actual building to a 100 horsepower Leffel turbine water wheel, which turned a vertical axle that powered the compressed air machines located in the powerhouse. So technically this was a powerhouse. It's all commonly called the Crystal Mill, so I usually use that terminology just for that's the way it's usually talked about. So as you probably know, President Cleveland pressed for the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, and Congress repealed it by October. The price of silver fell to 62 cents, crushing the hopes of silver miners in Colorado and really throughout the West. So these national economic factors would affect the fortunes of the mining men who had sunk a lot of investment dollars and hard work into Sheep Mountain. The Black Queen mine closed at the end of July, and it would remain shut down for several years, probably initially due to the price of silver, but it was also undergoing quite a bit of litigation as well. So the superintendent contracted with the Sheep Mountain Tunnel and Mining Company to continue their tunnel, still hoping to intersect the lower workings of the Black Queen vein. In January 1895, Ben Phillips drove a crosscut drift, hoping to intersect a rich vein of the Black Queen, but by April, he admitted that the miners had only found a pocket of low-grade mineral. But Phillips quickly added that, quote, ore will be encountered without doubt in the next 30 to 40 feet. By June, the tunnel and various crosscuts had been driven 3,600 feet into the mountainside, with the hope that before long, this company's perseverance will be crowned with success. So a force of men continued driving the tunnel with the use of air drills. Little work was performed after 1895. In 1901, Horace Williams, who was Ben Phillips' brother-in-law, obtained a court judgment against the company for wages owed to several workers in the amount of just under $8,000. There was a sheriff's sale of the Sheep Mountain Tunnel and Mining Company in 1902. 2 years later, the double track, which should have been occupied with ores, ore cars taking out treasures from the well-lit tunnel, was removed and sold. So thus ended the first attempt to try to lock into the riches of the mines. It would be another decade before another group of investors would try their luck in uncovering rich ore in the Sheep Mountain Tunnel. The Marble Booster said that the property had been tied up in litigation. In 1914, the Crystal River Mining, Milling, and Power Company took over the workings of the tunnel. They employed 30 men at one point in the summer. The mouth of the tunnel had caved in for several hundred feet, so they had to tunnel in a new entrance to connect in with the rest of it. And this work cost a lot more than expected. But by December, the company had failed to pay all of the workers' wages, and they shut down for the winter. Now, in the summer of 1915, the president of the company said that things were going to be run in a different fashion from now on. And it was then that the company constructed a reducing mill and concentrator. And that's what you see the wreckage of to the right of the powerhouse that's there in the photo here. But once again, by December, the company had not paid out the workers' wages. So not a real successful operation. Of course, hope springs eternal the next year. So some people thought a rejuvenated crystal seems assured. So you can see there the flume to channel the water to the mill. So you can see the buildings in crystal, and then the mill is that one roof that you can see sticking up there. There were plans for the Black Queen to start operations again. Workers enlarged the mill to handle the expected increased volume of ore. And in fact, a report by E.J. Dittus, a mining engineer, estimated a profit of $200 a day of lead, zinc, and silver ores. Now, this report was furnished courtesy of Porter Nelson. And Porter Nelson was the son of a wealthy merchant in Virginia. He graduated from Roanoke College and he went west. He ventured to Colorado as a surveyor on the Santa Fe Railroad. By 1888, he had arrived in Aspen and began making real estate investments with money given to him by his father. Over the years, he would sink around $250,000 into various mining operations in the area. Now, Porter Nelson had both supporters and detractors. He had been elected mayor of Aspen in 1897, and one newspaper described him as a man of business ability and integrity. However, in 1908, a headline in the Aspen Daily Times screamed, "Indignation over board stupidity. Taxpayers up in arms against employing Porter Nelson as the examiner," which referred to an investigation of the county treasurer's books. The subheadline continued, "Nelson has promoted many mining schemes that never amounted to anything." They charged that he was not qualified to audit the treasurer's books because, in fact, he was a tax dodger himself and had not paid taxes on his own home. And he owed money to a lot of people. But Porter Nelson would continue to be a booster for the Rock Creek Mining District for years to come. So in 1917, the Sheep Mountain Tunnel was operating both the mine and the mill with a good force of men. But by October, the property was listed for delinquent taxes. Porter Nelson continued to promote the district. He furnished two reports, one in 1919 and the other in 1934, that argued for the profitability of the Sheep Mountain Tunnel project. Also in the mid-1930s, Nelson issued a report on the vast mineral reserves that still remained in the Black Queen mine. A.J. Mitchell inspected the mine and he conservatively estimated the value of the ore reserves at $142,000. Not content with such a low figure, Nelson stated that when considering other areas of the mine not included in Mitchell's report, he estimated a value of $650,000 of ore in sight. Now, undaunted by the failure of the Sheep Mountain Tunnel, Nelson proposed yet another tunnel to access the lower workings of the Black Queen and many other veins along the way, as you can see here in this drawing that was a proposal for the project. So Nelson claimed that this tunnel would open up ore bodies so large that they could not be worked out within the span of a man's life. He also stated that Professor Hayden had made a statement that there was enough silver in those mining claims to pay the national debt. I'm not sure if that's still true today or ever was true, but no one took Porter Nelson up on these suggestions. So, okay. So in John Vanderwilt's, in John Vanderwilt's report here, that he, the geology and mineral deposits of the Snowmass Mountain area, Gunnison County, Colorado. He said that the purpose, repeating the purpose of the tunnel was to intersect these veins. He says, unfortunately, however, the tunnel is confined to a few beds and no cross-cutting veins of any consequence were intersected. He says that in the longer drift, a fairly persistent bed of black shaly hornfels averaging 2 feet in thickness was believed by some to be the same bed that contained the ore in the Black Queen mine. Lithologically, the beds are similar. Both contain pyrite, small amounts of sphalerite, galena, and calcite veinlets. However, other similar beds are also present. It is therefore not safe to correlate any two of them if they cannot be traced continuously, a condition very difficult to fulfill on the slope of Sheep Mountain. So basically all the reports of, we've encountered some rich ore were really nothing substantive. Vanderbilt also says that at the mill, you can see there some ore was treated, but without success. So the grade of the ore was too low to be successful in terms of, because the methods, the inefficient methods of gravity separation were used, and that just couldn't recover enough of the value. So Porter Nelson wrote about the scenic backdrop of the Crystal Mill. In one of his reports, he stated that the picture presented by the surroundings was one of the grandest and most picturesque one could desire. The mountains had a grandeur never to be dismissed. And I think we could all agree that he was correct in this assessment, and the beauty of the location would contribute to its popularity today. So here are some of the buildings that remain in the town of Crystal, just a few, there's others as well. So in the 1930s, Emmett Gould bought the mill site, many nearby mining claims, and town lots in Crystal, and his descendants formed the Treasure Mountain Ranch, which currently owns many properties in the area, including the mill site and the Black Queen Mine. So here's just a couple images. Ghost town books almost always have some picture or drawing of the mill, and the other view is just a picture that I have myself. So postcards from the 1960s, another one says, "The ore crushing mill, picturesque reminder of the days when silver was king." And there's been considerable restoration work done in the ensuing decades, which maybe one of our other people here today could comment on the work he's done on that. Okay, so if you go there today, getting there is not easy. It's a four-wheel drive road. You need to have some high clearance. It's not a particularly steep road, so at least in that regard, it's not too bad. There are a few drop-offs like this one here. I think somewhere along the lines here, there's a car sort of in the bottom of the drainage there. So probably got there by means you don't want to repeat. So, it is mostly a one-lane road with turnouts here. So I think I took this picture when we were waiting in the turnout for these people to go by us. It's about a 5-mile drive from Marble. So you can see there's Aspen, and you have to go down there from Carbondale and through the Crystal River Valley through Marble, and then about the 5-mile distance into Crystal. Okay. So you can still view the mill from the road today. Actually, the road that you stand on is some of the material that they took out of the Sheep Mountain Tunnel. So it's kind of a wide spot there where you can view the mill. It is, again, as I said, probably one of the more photographed sites in all of Colorado. It's very beautiful and picturesque. I hope to go there again one day, maybe when the aspens are turning. That would be beautiful as well. And today it stands as a monument to the search for silver. And the scenic beauty is the lasting legacy of the site. Okay, so that's my presentation. I'll take any questions you might have or comments or additional information.
Okay, anybody have questions? Oh, Karen's iPad has a question. Karen?
Were there actually other mines that were profitable in the area?
Yeah, some were for a time. So the Black Queen Mine was quite profitable for quite a few years, especially in the 1880s and at least into the 1890s. So that mine was quite profitable, and there were others in the area. I don't think there were necessarily too many others that were necessarily cut by the Sheep Mountain Tunnel that had a whole lot of prosperity. There was the Lead King mine up in the up the valley a bit that I think I've read about being a profitable mine. But a lot of times, we we hear about all these successful mines and we assume that, well, they were all successful, and many were not. Many got investment dollars and then, used that money to pay miners. So I guess it got money into the communities and, had that effect. But a lot of mines really weren't successful. One historian of the area, kind of makes a general comment about, well, some operations were successful and some weren't, but you usually don't see a whole lot of information about, well, was this mine successful overall or not? Now, one reason for that perhaps is because it's actually hard to determine, because most of the time we don't have access to the company's record books, and so we don't necessarily know for sure. But you can kind of look at, well, what are they saying in the newspaper? Sometimes those values are inflated, so you can't always believe those. But what I see, the continual refrain in many of the newspaper reports on the Sheep Mountain Tunnel saying, well, we're almost there. We're next 30 feet, we'll get rich ore, and it just never happens, right? There was no reports of, hey, we finally found it. Now we're taking out all this rich ore. So you kind of have to almost look for the absence of information when trying to make that determination. And then, the report by Vanderbilt, he pretty much says that, there wasn't really anything substantial found with 3,600 feet of this tunnel.
Where was the nearest railroad?
The nearest railroad was at Carbondale. Now I think they did put the railroad up to Marble for the
Marble quarry.
You're right, yeah. And there was continuous talk of, well, this could be profitable. This area could really take off if we built a railroad up to the Crystal area. Maybe that would really make all the mines take off. And, sure, I mean, that would make it easier to haul out the ore, perhaps reduce the cost. And, certainly that's an issue. But then, the railroad's going to look at, is that really going to be worth it for them? And nobody ever did it. So the railroad was always a few miles away.
You still need ore.
Yeah, you need it to be rich enough, So there was ore there. In fact, the Black Queen mine, they were noted for having really nice specimens of wire silver. Actually managed to find one of those specimens in the LA County Museum. It wasn't really very pretty, but the ore did win a prize at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. So, there were many reports of rich ore from the Black Queen, but, just not enough to really continue to make it profitable. And the surrounding mines, really pretty much were not that profitable.
Okay, Lael, is it Lael, Laley?
It's Lyle.
Okay.
So based off of your research then, to what would you attribute the failure? Would you posit that it was a lack of luck, ineptitude, or was it there's some exaggeration involved?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been any of those things. I mean, I think that probably my guess is that they thought they really had a good thing on their hands and they just weren't really willing to give it up once they continued to just not really find anything. So, in mining history, it's kind of hard to determine that too. What are their motivations? So,
Right.
There's lots of mining scams and you can't really hardly ever prove that, because then you would have to say, well, did they knowingly go into this just to take investment dollars and, abscond with it? I don't have any evidence of that. But certainly with other instances, you can look at if that was a factor, or, did they just believe that they really had a good thing here and they would soon find ore, because that's what they kept saying. So the Mining History Journal, or no, the Engineering and Mining Journal years ago had an article about that. Like, well, how do you tell the difference between a scam and someone who just believes that they really have a great thing? And, sometimes you don't really know. Sometimes it's any of those things. There are some scams, but there are some people who just knowingly, they think they have a good thing, but they really don't. And the Engineering and Mining Journal said that, those might be some of the more dangerous people, the people who really believe in the value of what they're doing, but it just never pays off.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Sam, you have a question?
Yeah, it's a related, maybe a repeat. Was there ever any litigation or anybody decide to shoot somebody because they've been ripped off, or any juicy stuff that surrounds this, what appears to me to be a bunch of scams? But anyway.
Well, if you want some juicy stories about shooting, you can read my book about Mrs. Captain Jack. Yeah, so she claims that she shot at people, but she actually only made very credible threats with her guns. So yeah, there are plenty of those stories with the Sheep Mountain Tunnel. Maybe not as much, but yeah. I kind of wondered about the family relations when, Horace Williams didn't get paid for all of his efforts, and it's a family affair. The Crystal community was quite close knit, and I spent some time just doing genealogy and look at all the interconnections among family members. So it'd be kind of curious to know how that affected family relations in a very small, tight-knit community, but I don't have any direct information about that.
Laylee, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was wondering to what extent the environment influenced the enterprise and the mining there. Were they able to work year round, or were they constrained by seasonality?
Yeah, it was very seasonal work. So, they would work until the snow made it impossible to do so. And then they would typically start up again, maybe in the late spring, because the snow stayed in there for quite some time. And if any of you are from that area, you can know how that's going. And usually the mines in the surrounding area, I would typically read about that. They would work maybe until November, maybe December if the snow's held off enough, depending on where the mine was. And then, they might not start up again until, May or possibly even June before things really got going. And especially in the early days, because if you're going over Schofield Pass, well, that gets a lot of snow and it's very high in elevation. I can't remember the exact elevation offhand, but the mountains around there are quite high in elevation. And so that definitely restricted operations, certainly in the 1880s, which is where I did most of my research for Captain Jack. And snow slides were a problem. There was one snow slide that occurred at the Black Queen mine that killed a couple of the miners. And so, yeah, those things were definitely factors, and that would affect how long they could continue to work.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Eric and I were up there, maybe 15 years ago. We took a Jeep tour up from Marble.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the road has gotten a little bit better since then, but yeah, it wasn't something that I wanted to drive. I was very happy to let the tour guide in the Jeep do all the driving.
Yeah, it can be a challenging road. I mean, I've done a lot of driving on roads like that, so I didn't really think it was too bad. And that's when I had a Toyota Tacoma, high clearance 4-wheel drive. So, but yeah, it shouldn't be attempted in, even most SUVs. I probably wouldn't recommend going up there in it, but it's a really cool drive.
Yeah, our tour guide was pointed to this little trail of some sort of automobile liquid going through town, through Marble. Some people with 4-wheel drives thought that they could, attack it, even though the people in Marble told them, no, don't try it. And, they took out their transmission or punched a hole in something, and we're at least able to get out of Marble afterwards, but he didn't know how far they got.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to see how that would happen if you all it takes is going over the wrong rock. And, yeah, and so that was certainly an issue in hauling the ore out, that was always a difficult process. And, in the early days, hauling out ore by burros, And actually, initially in the 1880s, they had to haul the ore out from the mines up and over Schofield Pass into Gothic or Crested Butte for some milling or eventual shipment to Gunnison or maybe eventually to Pueblo for the smelter there. So, that certainly was a factor in reducing profitability. And so then eventually the wagon road was built up the Crystal River Valley. And so then they could haul the ore out to Carbondale there. But certainly that impacts profitability. And
Yeah.
but it's a fun place to go today. I hope to go back, but probably a good idea just to let someone else do the driving if your vehicle isn't really up for it, or you just want to not take the risk.
All right. Laylee, do you have another question? And guess not. Okay.
Has anybody here ever been up there?
We have. There's two of us. It makes for a very interesting journey. We went to Redstone several times for family reunions. And I'm probably, you can't find any stray marble along a 133 anymore, but back in up through the 90s, there you could see stray marble that had fallen off the railroad. But there's probably been enough artists now in Redstone that they've collected all the stray marble. Going to the quarry is also an interesting one too.
Yeah. Well, maybe at the next history conference, that might be one of the field trips up there.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone had mentioned
Okay.
that. Yeah. So I think, Matt, you had contacted me about you had done some restoration work up there. Would you like to share anything about that? I see the name up there.
I guess not.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Jane.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you. That's real interesting.